It's now time for this month's broadcast of Learning Now TV.
Kate, it's March already, and that means another Learning Now TV program hits the airwaves. So what's happening this month, Kate? Who have we got on?
Well, spring has sprung. You can even see a little hint of sunlight coming in through in Wales, which is rare. So I hope the daffodils are out wherever you are watching us today. So we've got some great highlights for you this month. I finally got to talk to Gary Cookson, which I've been wanting to do for ages following the publication of his book last year. He's got some really interesting thoughts, particularly on hybrid working, remote learning, very of the moment, so super topical. John Hinchcliffe, who is the newly crowned winner of the Colin Corder Award at the LPI's annual awards this year. Very exciting talking to him. And Bob Mosher is presenting the second part of his series on how virtual instruction powers performance. So kind of dovetails in a little bit with what Gary's talking about there as well.
All sounds great, Kate. Well, everybody, absolutely. Enjoy the show.
Enjoy. I'm thrilled to extend an overdue welcome to Learning Now TV to Gary Cookson. He is a father of four, husband of one, and in the little bit of spare time he does have, he runs a successful business and writes the occasional book. So thrilled to have him on with us today. Thank you for joining us, Gary. HR for Hybrid Working was published last year. For those of our viewers that haven't read the book yet, can you tell us a bit about it? And then I'm keen to see how things have evolved as well since you published it.
Hey, thanks, Kate. Thanks for a lovely welcome and introduction as well. Yeah, the book was published last year in June, the result of nearly 12 months of solid research from me. And I'm not shy about publicising it and speaking about it, so I don't need much invitation to do that. The book was the culmination of nearly 20 years worth of experience of hybrid working for me. It isn't something that came new to me when the pandemic hit. It's something I was doing for 2 decades, helping individuals, leading teams and advising organisations how to do. And along the way, a lot of the time through trial and error, I'd learned quite a lot about how to get things done in a hybrid way, how to deliver services in a hybrid way. And when the pandemic hit and suddenly a lot more people started doing that, I was asked a lot of questions about why, how, when, what, all those types of things. And I thought maybe there's a book in this. Maybe I could distill some of this thinking, some of these experiences and a lot of the mistakes as well that I've made along the way into one place. And that was what the book was all about. And it met with an interesting reception, really positive reception, and seemed to touch on quite a lot of things that people were wondering about, because it's fairly easy to deliver people practices, L&D, HR, OD, when everybody's face-to-face. It's also relatively easy to get your head around how to do it when everybody's fully remote. But trying to do it when people are flitting between the two and making that hybrid working experience different and unique and effective, well, that's where the book starts to touch on. How do we do that differently?
And it seems to me, here we are almost at, the 3-year anniversary of lockdown, and in the UK, certainly. And it seems to me that people have still yet to crack hybrid working. And, there's a quote in the 2023 Deloitte Human Capital Trends research, which, if you haven't read it, I would recommend that you read, everybody watching. And there's a quote in there that talks about begging organisational leaders to not look at their companies through yesterday's lens. And I think there's been a lot of publicity around certain organisations sort of demanding a return to the office, etc. And it does feel like there's a bit of that going on. But the world has changed. People they don't want to go back permanently. They do want this flex and the hybrid model that you're talking about, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And you and I, Kate, we've talked about this ourselves and how it helps us in our personal lives as well. I think the quote from Deloitte is an interesting one, and it's an accurate one as well, because people who were used to leading, managing, working in the old world, they've had to unlearn a lot of stuff. And I work with a lot of people who've only really become leaders in the last 3 years. And if I'm honest, they are finding it a lot easier than people have been leaders for a lot longer, because they haven't had to unlearn all of the stuff. They've just come at it new. And this is what leadership and management is for those people. But it's not what it was for you and I and lots of other people watching this as well. Leadership and management in the old world was quite a sensory experience. You could see people, you could hear people, and in some cases, unfortunately, you could smell them as well. And you can't do that in a remote environment. You have to learn to operate with different evidence, different data, different information that isn't quite as sensory. And you'll not be with the same people all of the time and with different people at different points of the week. So you have to rely on different senses. But just like if you were to lose your sight or lose your hearing in real life, you can adapt and you can live a normal life by using other things differently. The same is true of leadership and management. So the quote that you gave is really accurately, you need to look at things differently because things have changed. We can't do all the things we used to now. We have to be different. There's a different management ask, different leadership ask.
And what are you seeing that's working in some of your, in some of your client organizations?
Well, I'll tell you what isn't working. And we can probably start from there, because what isn't working is the arbitrary days of the week split, 2 days here, 3 days there, or whatever the split might be. And you mentioned before about some companies trying to force people back to the office. And that's often the language they use. We need you to be here for a minimum X number of days per week. And that to me is putting the cart before the horse. That doesn't really work. It leads to a lot of resentment, and it leads to not hybrid working, but it leads to some people working at home for part of the week and then in the office on site for the rest of the week. That isn't hybrid working. That's flexible working, and that has a lot of benefits as well. Hybrid working is something else. So the clients that I've been working with that are doing it really well are taking a few steps back and trying to look at work on a very granular level. They're looking at the tasks themselves and working out for each task, in each job, in each team, in each organization, when, where, and how does that need to be done? And looking at the bigger picture of that, where you build up what percentage of your tasks need doing at a fixed point in space and time, to borrow a quote from the 11th Doctor, which of your tasks need doing there? When you can see that, if that's a big percentage, then you need to be on site between certain hours. But that might not be the case for all of your tasks. It certainly won't be the case for all of your team and not for all of the organization. But you can build it up task by task. And it's a very granular way. It's a job crafting approach, I think. But it helps you then to get form following function. You're building the organization from the ground up rather than imposing what you think hybrid working is. You get to a point that hybrid working happens naturally through doing the analysis, through the detail. It is time consuming. It will take a lot more effort, but the end result is you'll have a lot more of an effective and efficient model for hybrid working. So that tends to work really well when teams can do that. What they quickly realize is there is no one size fits all approach to hybrid working, even in one organization, sometimes not even in one team. But what it does lead to as well is a rethinking of what work actually is. When you start thinking about when, where, and how work takes place, if the answer to that is one that you don't like, it prompts change. It prompts discussions about how can we change the way this task is done so that it better utilizes the skills, the requirements of the people who are doing it. Do we have to do it at all? Can we outsource it? Can we automate it? And it prompts a lot of good discussions about the way work needs to evolve. So hybrid working, I think, is the conversation starter rather than the end goal.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, there's loads in there that you said that really stands out to me. And like the sensory piece, I really love, but also that sense of crafting. And, you know, my 9-year-old son is very into Lego, and, you know, it makes me think of that building, but it's modular, right? So it's, yeah, not every team, not every department, not every company will every site will have the same requirements. So I think that's a really great way to think about it. When it comes to like learning specifically, I think you know, obviously e-learning, you know, digital learning, live online learning is nothing new, but it again, the kind of that hybrid piece has left its mark, hasn't it? Because especially if you're trying to run a workshop and half the people are remote and half the people are in the room, that's not, you're not creating an experience that's equal for everybody, are you? So what sort of impact have you seen specifically around learning in the organizations that you're working with?
Well, there's a few things you mentioned there. We'll start with remote or virtual learning. We know, you and I both know, it's not the same as face-to-face learning, and we shouldn't really try to compare. It's got its own niche in learning culture and the learning ecosystem. It's different. And what the last 3 years have taught us is the skill set, the mindset you need to make those things work is distinctly different. And I think if they haven't already, then heads of learning need to be really thinking about how do they upskill or reskill their learning professionals to do that effectively, because that type of learning, it isn't going away. Second point, you mentioned what I call hybrid training sessions, where you've got some people in the room on site and other people virtual. And to make that work, you need world-class audio video capabilities within the training room to at least have a chance of equalizing the experience of people. But that's frankly unrealistic for a lot of organizations, and certainly isn't realistic for any of the clients I work with. So my advice, my recommendation to anybody thinking about hybrid training sessions is don't. There's far more to it than most organizations can realistically expect to achieve. And unless you've got, again, the skill set, the mindset, but more importantly, the equipment and the resources to make that work, it simply isn't advisable to do it. So I say either keep your learning face-to-face or keep your learning virtual. Try not to mix the two. But the other thing to think about in terms of the way hybrid working is affecting what learning professionals need to do is it's not all about the live session anymore. It might have been in the past. And by live session, I mean both the face-to-face and virtual versions of that. But the main place at which hybrid workers learn is not going to be the live session. And that changes the way we think as learning professionals. We need to start providing different types of content, audio, video content, curated resources. We need to build communities of practice. We need to do things in different ways so that people can learn in the flow of work, just in time, at the point of need. And there's a lot to do there. And lots of learning professionals are geared up to delivering brilliant live sessions. But we need to be comfortable with people learning outside of those, not just when they're in the same place as us. And I think that's a big mindset challenge as much as anything else.
I think you've just summed up, you know, a huge challenge that still, you know, it's been facing our profession for a long time, and we still, you know, haven't got it cracked yet. But some of what you've talked about there is just brilliant in terms of, yeah, just giving people things to think about and some practical takeaways as well. Now, we could talk all day. I have no worries about that. But I know that we'll put the link to your book on the screen and a link to that from the website. I'd recommend that to anybody. As I said, I don't think most organisations have got this model cracked yet. But if you were a betting man, what maybe is, you know, a prediction or maybe a word of advice that you would give our viewers just before we wrap up on kind of, you know, get moving, making progress with this and helping shift mindset internally?
Okay. I think having the conversation with senior leaders about where they see the organization heading in future is a really important one to do. If you're a learning professional or an other people professional, then that's the kind of conversation you should be starting and facilitating. But I would recommend starting small on this. Person by person, team by team, build it up that way. So the modular approach that we mentioned before, you can't change the whole organization like that in one go. and you shouldn't try. But you can make hybrid working work for you as an individual, and then for the rest of your team, and then piece by piece, one conversation at a time, you can change people's minds. Start small, end big is my advice with this.
I love it. Gary, you've given me loads to think about. I know you will have given the viewers a lot to think about as well. Thank you so much. We'd love to have you back on again. We can see how this situation evolves. Something tells me it's going to be unfolding for quite some time. But for now, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Next up, we've got Rob Clark, reliable as ever with his roundup of L&D news this month. He talks to the wonderful Mike Bollinger. I'm very biased, but Mike is absolutely fantastic with the work that he does at Cornerstone, digging into some report they've just done, which found skills are moving so quickly, business leaders can't keep up. I'm not sure that is news, but there is some really, really good stats and insights in that report, because I think that is a challenge that most organisations are currently wrestling with. L&D's relationship with business leaders. Anna Barnett joins us from Mind Tools to outline a new report's main findings about the areas that business leaders say are the most important. And he also talks to Nick Bate from Blue Eskimo on L&D salaries, something very close to everybody.
Interesting. I hope you're right up there, Kate, at the top of the pyramid when it comes to L&D salaries. Naturally.
Money.
What business leaders rate as most important are areas where they don't believe L&D has a role. We take a look at L&D's relationship with business leadership. L&D finds measuring impact difficult. We have a Learning Impact Gold Award winner to explain their approach. Skills are moving so quickly, business is struggling to identify and align them with its needs. A new report shows that artificial intelligence will help solve this problem. How well paid is a career in learning and development? We have the answer. A new report out from Mind Tools for Business shows what business leaders care about the most are not priorities for learning and development. Performance, innovation, customer satisfaction, business transformation and reducing costs top the list of what's important, yet are areas where business leaders feel L&D does not offer a strong contribution. However, staff retention and talent strategy are other priority areas where L&D is doing really well.
This year, business leaders care about things like reducing costs, customer satisfaction and growth. But today, less than 60% of leaders think that L&D have a role to play in these particular areas. And even fewer think that that role is a significant one. Now, we've been reporting for a few years now that L&D are invisible to their leaders. And I think we're seeing the same in 2023. But the impact of leaders not seeing L&D as being a vital and influential function in the organisation is far-reaching, especially at a time when budgets are tight and leaders are really having to make some difficult decisions about what is and isn't worth backing. So I think this is the biggest challenge that L&D teams face right now. You know, they need to change this perception because it isn't right. You know, there's plenty of evidence showing that L&D are hugely influential in things that leaders care about, like saving money, but leaders almost need to be reminded of that.
This year's gold winner in the Measuring Impact category at the Learning Awards was Imparter and its project with environmental resources management. To find out what they did, Imparter's Alejandra Chulsenko is here. Alejandra, many congratulations. Demonstrating learning impact is notoriously difficult for learning and development. In fact, despite learning teams saying it's their biggest need currently, remains our weakest skill. What did you do here? How did you build this into the project?
CDP has always been a business investment. It's never been just another learning and development budget item. So for this reason, proving the impact of the training was always the most important aspect to this project. So from the very beginning, we built measurements in the original solution. The main purpose was to ensure that the ERM business, they could carry on investing in their people. So with this measurement project, we make sure that we're helping them meet their strategic business needs, and we keep on refining this measurement methodology.
Cornerstone produces an annual report about workplace learning trends. It's called People Research Lab, and the 2023 report came out recently. It found that business will rely much more on artificial intelligence to predict future skills needs.
As you know, organizations are still struggling to anticipate which skills and align skills and then track that skills growth is often a fragmented process. And AI obviously has come to the front with some of the conversational interfaces that are making it more acceptable, but it's really around some of the things that go on under the covers that are of import here. AI can be used to analyze a variety of data sources, job postings, training materials, skills profiles. It can help drive matching skills in new and interesting areas. A really good example of that, for instance, is the automotive industry. Talk about an area that is rapidly changing to battery electric vehicles and autonomous driving techniques and so on. AI bringing those personalized experience and uncovering who may have the right skills for that industry, as an example, is really important. AI actually covers a lot of HR that you might not think about. Obviously, recruitment, but think about chatbots and being able to rapidly find policy. Think about content matching and personalized learning journeys. Adjacent skills, as you go through the skills analysis, it's not just, do I have this skill, do I have that skill, but what skills might translate back to the automotive example. As you're doing performance conversations with individuals and you write things, AI can help us make sure they're using right tone and tenor. It can go out and scrape and do sentiment analysis and bring insights back to us that give us an idea around real-time or near real-time data. And the fact that it's available 24/7 is really going to change the nature of HR, in my opinion.
Annual pay is a concern for all. The increasing cost of living affects everyone. It has led to strikes in many sectors as increases in pay struggle to keep a pace with increases in inflation. What's the picture here in learning and development? How well paid are people working in L&D?
Pay compares well with the UK average salary, which is 33,000 according to the Office of National Statistics. So just over 80% of our total respondents earned more than this last year. So 45% of all of those surveyed earned between 31,000 and 50,000. The gap's definitely widening, Rob. We've been in a candidate-driven market now for about 2 years, with demand for skills outstripping available supply by quite a wide margin in most areas. As a consequence of that, 50% of our respondents received pay rises in the last year, compared with 47% in 2021, so a slight increase. But over the course of this year, we'd expect to see a transition from more of a candidate-driven market to more of an employer-driven one, at least while the economic downturn continues. Most people feel that they're getting paid about what they should be. 65% of L&D professionals, in fact, felt that their salary was about right, compared to 57% of respondents last year. Basically, it's clear that salary levels and salary expectations are increasingly converging, Rob.
That's Learning News. As always, full features with the people I spoke to where we explore the news in more detail are on the website, along with more on each of the news updates you've seen tickered on the screen. I wish we had more time. That's all from me for this bulletin. Thank you for watching.
upskill and inform your learners with Mind Tools for Business. Empower your people to thrive at work and help them step up and meet everyday workplace challenges with confidence. Our toolkit provides unlimited access to thousands of quality assured resources, all in one place. It's easy to use and on demand, anytime, anywhere. Experience stress-free onboarding with dedicated client partner support. And get access to our library of industry insight and expert analysis. Perform, manage, lead with Mind Tools for Business. Visit mindtoolsbusiness.com to find out more.
The indefatigable Robin Hoyle is back this month, and he's continuing his series of interviews. And this time he's re-interviewing, because she's already been on the program, he's re-interviewing Ina Weinbauer-Heidel, who runs the Institute for Learning Transfer. And that is her almost career-long obsession with how to make learning transfer more sticky and more effective. It's an interview well worth listening to.
Ina, thank you for joining me on Learning Now TV. When you were last on Learning Now TV, you talked about designing for transfer, the idea that L&D teams need to help their organizations to get a handle on what learning transfer really means and start from there. And you talk specifically about getting the managers involved in that, or supervisors involved. What is it that L&D teams need to do from the work that you've been doing to help their managers and supervisors to support the transfer of learning back into the workplace?
So the support from supervisors is definitely one of the most researched factors or determinants of transfer of training. We know from research that when supervisors do not support participants in applying what they have learned, show no interest, are kind of, so for example, when the employee returns back from training and the supervisor says, nice that you were away for 2 days, but let's now come back to our work. Please get away with those fancy ideas that you learned there. Then of course it's really, really hard to make transfer happen. Yeah. So a really important thing is that we kind of get supervisors involved in terms of being interested, monitoring what people apply in their everyday work life. The main question is, how do we get supervisors on board? That's what I get asked quite often from HR practitioners. And what I've learned here is mainly that commitment beats bureaucracy. So as long as we kind of hand out big forms where supervisors have to fill in what they have discussed with their employees and send it to the HR department, we intensify a widespread view, which is the view that the supervisor has to do work for the HR department. And in fact, it's exactly the other way around. It's the HR department who supports the supervisors in their role of developing their teams. And this is something that we need to bring in the mindset of the supervisors. So we need to make sure that they understand what is in for me. So what do I get out of this training program? For example, if I'm sending my employees to a kind of sales training, then we have to kind of make the supervisors understand that they get a team who kind of get these new 3 customers with the help of the training. Then you get much more buy-in than when you just say, they learn another 20 techniques like the last time. So what is in for me, for the supervisors, is one of the main things. The next thing is that they have to understand how important their role is. Most supervisors do not see their own role in the transfer process. They kind of think that they are sending their employees to the training department and get them back in a kind of repaired way and more functioning. And that's of course not the way how learning takes place. So they can get kind of inspired in the training program, but the real application happens in the everyday work life, where they need encouragement, where a supervisor needs to say, wow, interesting, you have tried that new thing, how did it go? So things like that. That's the second thing. Make sure that they understand how important the role is. And the third thing is, and maybe that's the most important one, at least what I see in everyday practice. The third thing is that the tools which we provide for supervisors to support the transfer of training need to be really, really, really easy. So as long as supervisors have this perspective that this is additional work and a lot of bureaucracy, they won't do it. For example, you can have this little coffee to go where you say, please, supervisor, go through these 4 questions with your employee after he returns. 15 minutes of conversation between employee and supervisor already has a significant impact. Or, for example, after every training module, send a little email to the supervisors where you can say, okay, these 4 topics were covered in the training. When they come back, just ask them these 2 or 3 questions, which have something to do with the content there, because it then makes seems like the supervisor is really, really interested in that very topic, that he or she knows quite well what the participant has learned in the training.
Yeah, so there's a design element there which says that we've got part of that process is to communicate with and gain feedback from the supervisors, and to have a two-way conversation, to give them a clear job to do, which is not too onerous and is not outside what they would ordinarily do. I mean, one of the things that we use is a reflective model, which just asks 3 questions, which is what, so what next, which is what did you do, so what have you learned, what are the implications, and what are you going to do next. But the objective of that is not for the supervisor to keep on asking those 3 questions. The objective is for the team members to start asking those questions of themselves. But it's not going to happen because they've been exposed to it 3 or 4 times through a training course. It's going to happen because it becomes the way we do things around here. This idea of what, so what next.
Yeah.
So in terms of that process of developing support for the learners, the other thing that you've talked about is the importance of planning for transfer.
Oh, yeah.
And that is part of the design of the program as well, that there is a meaningful set of actions intended after they've been through the program. So just talk to me about what that transfer planning stage looks like, feels like, and most importantly, what are the outcomes that you would expect if you think that the transfer is going to happen?
Yeah. So again, one of those 12 levers, and maybe that's one of the quick win levers, is called transfer planning. Transfer planning is the fact that if we see participants leaving the training room with a very, very precise implementation plan, that can be really a sentence. So on Monday at 5 p.m., I'm using this technique XYZ in my next sales conversation with Mrs. Meyer. So a plan like that. And we know that when people leave the training room with a plan like that, we can increase the probability of transfer we can double or even triple this probability. And that's a lot. And I would so much recommend to not leave this effect out. I know that a lot of trainers hurry up at the end of the training sessions. We don't have that much time left. We want to do a little feedback round where we share with each other how nice it was. And then we kind of get in a hurry and we skip this ugly part of, okay, now everyone please formulate his or her transfer implementation. That's kind of the hard part at the end. Everyone is tired. No one wants to do it. But if we don't do it in the training room, and leave the training or even the virtual training room and leave it with this intention of, I will go through all my material again, we won't do it at all. That's really quite sure, which we know from research. And I would really recommend every facilitator to reserve a bit of his or her energy to this very last part, to encourage people. Now write down your implementation intention, even discuss it with a colleague. So go in a breakout room with a partner, discuss about your implementation plan, discuss about your vision where your little implementation plan can take you. So what will happen if you implement that step and maybe 5 or 6 other steps? How would it feel like? So kind of really bring this emotional part in, a huge vision and a little baby step in a very precise way. And in best terms, even share it with others in a bigger group. That would be the best version. It depends a bit on how much time you have, because by that way, we can double or triple transfer success rates.
And you talk there about going off into maybe a breakout room with a partner, with a buddy, and having that conversation. You've also talked about the support of that individual, not necessarily instead of, but alongside the supervisory team leader support, or where the culture of the organisation or the organisation of work means that team leader supervisory support is not available to people in quite the same way as one would like. So the idea of the buddy supporting people, why and how does that peer support work at the end of a training or at the point of transfer of the learning into the workplace? Where does that work?
Yeah. So the support from peers is another of the 12 levers, and we know from research that if others are interested in what we have learned, kind of support these new behaviors, then of course this increases transfer success rate. The interesting part here is that in most training programs we have 2 peer groups. The one peer groups is our team members in our natural surroundings. So my work colleague who has his office next to me, that's the really important peer group. And then we have this temporary peer group. So the other colleagues who share the training with me, who are in the same training room, who have done this, the same training. And the important group that we need to address here is the support from our colleagues in the workplace, which is sometimes quite hard because they have not been in training with me. And that is the reason why we work with buddies, with the help of this other peer group, of this training peer group, and kind of say, okay, if we cannot manage that our natural peer group supports us in the application of the training, then we need to address the others. And that's, for example, by just saying, okay, ask your peer, your buddy, what has he or she been able to apply already? How did it work out? Share your plans with each other and ask each other what has worked so far.
Ina Weinbach-Heidel, joining us from the Institute of Transfer Effectiveness, from her work within academia, within Austria. Thank you ever so much for sharing your insights with the audience of Learning Now TV. And I'm sure it will raise lots and lots of questions and lots of ideas. So we'll make sure that we put a link to the institute on the video, but we'll also make sure that we've got a link to your very fine book around the levers of transfer effectiveness on the website as well. Ina, thank you very much indeed. Lovely to speak to you again.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Maybe we'll do that later. Hey, so you can see this is just like using a whiteboard in a classroom. And then you do my 3-year-old's favourite, you just have a nice little wiggle. 1, 2, 3, rate it now.
A really quick question, you might want to answer this later.
You see, I love this.
Bob Mosher is back, this time with the second part of his new series, How Virtual Instruction Powers Performance, this time focusing on spaced learning, reflection, and reviewing what we've learned. Amen is all I can say, Bob. Amen.
Yes, Indeed. It's very helpful and practical and insightful, and you'd be crazy to miss that series.
Greetings, Bob Mosher here. I sure do hope this video finds you safe and well, friends. I am the senior partner in an organization called Apply Synergies that helps learning companies and departments figure out how to do workflow learning in something called the 5 Moments of Need, which I actually did a series similar to this on a while ago. I'm really honored and pleased to be invited back, as you may know, because this is the second episode of this series, to do a bit on the reality of virtual instruction and its impact on performance and learning. It really is a profound medium, friends, that we've got this opportunity to use. You know, COVID was obviously a horrific thing for our world. At the same time, there were many doors that it opened, many opportunities that it gave us. A lot of innovative thinking and approaches in learning and life were invented, frankly, out of the circumstance that was and is, frankly, still COVID. A big thing for L&D was virtual instruction. I talked to a learning leader who said that he'd been trying for 2 years to get a virtual platform into his company. Couldn't get any attention. COVID comes along, and in 4 to 6 weeks, friends, not that he only have the platform, but he already had classes being taught. And that's a remarkable thing. And it is clearly here to stay, particularly with the hybrid workforce we're facing with many people who still work out of their homes and probably will for the foreseeable future. So what have we learned? Well, of course, the first thing we did was we took our classes as they were, the PowerPoints we use and the examples and lessons and practices, and we put them on a virtual world. We put instructors on the screen, brought people in, and it did okay. Right? But we're several years into this now, and there's some really powerful instructional methodologies and principles and learning theory that's emerging around this whole idea of virtual optimizing instruction and, of course, performance, which is what it's all about. So in the next 2 series, this included, I'm going to go deeper into a few of those principles, a little at a macro level today, and then I'm going to go specifically into some design options and things that we're learning about the nuts and bolts of delivering virtual instruction. So let's step back a bit to this idea of what virtual brought us. Now, like I said earlier, when we first brought these on, we realized right away that our 3-week, 5-day, 1-day course was not going to fly well in a virtual world in the same time frame. Let's start macro, right? We couldn't keep people on here for a day, let alone days. And at least I hope you're not doing that because there's distractions. They're sitting in their homes. What's incredibly powerful about this learning medium that I don't think we've considered in our holistic view of all this is that people go very often from their desk and their work in a matter of seconds to class. And then when class ends, they go back to work again in a matter of seconds, if not minutes. Talk about application. Talk about proximity to the workflow, right? This is a remarkable thing to take advantage of, even outside of the virtual experience itself. So we're going to talk a bit about that. One big thing is this idea about something called space learning. It's been around an awful long time in our industry, and it basically deals with cognitive load and one of the most powerful things that we can build into learning, and that is time. When we bring people into classes or we write our e-learnings, although they may break the e-learnings up on purpose, they can do that. The classroom basically is a come, event, stop, stay as long as we can keep you because we flew you in, you drove in, whatever. We have to optimize that time in that way. And then we send you home. And the reality is, I think we can all agree, that we overteach often when it comes to the classroom. We just simply cover too much content because of the nature of the beast. So in the virtual world, that, and I'm standing in front of a brick wall here, right, breaks down the brick and mortar of a classroom. We've got to get out of this mindset, even though it's a virtual event, you might be calling it a virtual classroom. I've started VILT, virtual instructor-led training. Those are all fine, but we've got to get out of the mindset that it is a classroom, 4 walls based thing. And therefore we have to treat it with certain ways around timing. Spaced learning lets us to do an hour to an hour and a half maximum of instruction. Now, a lot of people say, Bob, if we go back to that small and take breaks, and I spread my day class or my week's class out, it's going to take months. Well, friends, arguably, let's think about this. Many learners take weeks, if not months, to process, if they can remember any of it anyway, frankly, all of our classes and apply them to work. So why not build that time into this medium? Secondly, reflection. People like to reflect on what they've done. The classroom doesn't give a lot of time for that because we've got to move through everything. In this world, we can have them reflect when the classroom ends, read more stuff, and get better. The third is review. We can have them go back and look at things, actually review their work. I'll talk about that in our next video. So again, spaced learning, reflection, and review. 3 incredibly powerful things that virtual instruction brings to this new medium. So let's go deeper into design next time. Hope this has been helpful, and looking forward to talking to you deeper and more about the power of virtual instruction and its impact, not just on learning, friends, but on performance. Take care, be safe, be well.
Today, I have the privilege of being joined by the 2023 Colin Corder Award winner from the Learning and Performance Institute's Learning Awards. This is the Blue Ribbon Award. It is given by the Institute. People don't apply for it. They can't go for it. They can't nominate themselves for it. You can't nominate anyone else for it. It's given to somebody who has given back and contributed to the learning industry and the profession in an outstanding way. And I'm pleased to welcome John Hinchcliffe to an illustrious, alumni of people there. So congratulations, John.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that alumni is pretty incredible, especially when you look at it, Laura Overton, Josh Burson. I mean, Learning Now TV's on, Nigel Payne's on there as well.
Very known, my ex-boss, David Wilson as well. So yeah, some really amazing names there. So obviously, I know modesty will prevent you from blowing your own trumpet too much, but people will know you from some of your, professional roles, your paying gigs, but there's so much that you've done around the sides of that. And it reminds me a little bit of when somebody gets an MBE and they think, why have they got an MBE for being a sports person? But actually they've got their MBE for their charitable endeavours. But can you explain and tell the Learning Now TV audience a little bit about this global community that you've built up? Because it might actually be very useful for some of them to join too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been in L&D for 15 years now. And I remember in those early days, you felt very small in it. It was really difficult finding all the different resources, free resources when you had no budget, and finding a community of practice to really share best practices with. And so as I've gone through my career, I've tried to really help out people, whether it is mentoring or whether in this case, when we got to COVID, actually creating a global community. I mean, in the beginning, I really just wanted to bring people together in a safe environment. So I learned Zoom, which sounds like a really crazy thing now, learning Zoom, but I learned about breakout rooms, made a lot of mistakes along the way, trying to be too complex, making Eventbrite gigs and all these kinds of things, but always having a focus on just trying to help people and bring them together. And that grew from 30 people to 100 people per week. And at the moment, this created into a thing called the GLDC, the Global Learning Development Community. And this has close to 3,000 members now. But for me, it's never been about status. It's actually never been about money, because I probably lost money on it. But for me, it was always doing the right thing, because doing the right thing is always the right thing. And with this, it's me, my own time and weekends, and even Christmas Day. We've hosted 3 Christmas Day meetups, just so that people who don't have anyone, or even have people, but they want to get an hour away from the family, can actually be around their extended family. So it's really that. In addition to this, talking to those people wanted to speak at conferences. And a big problem is when you want to speak at conferences, you might need to speak at a conference to be able to speak at a conference. It's this weird circle that we have.
Chicken and egg, yeah.
Yep. So I looked at it and I thought, well, why can't I do that? So having a chat to other organizations, created this thing called Welcome into the Awesome, and co-produced a 2-day conference that had 49 first-time speakers. And it was completely free, no sponsors, just because I wanted to make a difference. So it's things like that. It's knowing that we have so many different tips and tricks here in the industry, I created this thing called One Tip Wednesday, which was you did a video about a tip and then you nominate 2 people, very much like the ice bucket challenge, but without the ice in the bucket. But really having people just share information, because that has such a knock-on effect of helping everybody. So there's things like that, but most of all, just mentoring and helping anybody that's really asked.
I mean, yeah, there's we had International Women's Day was this month. So, people were talking a lot about lifting as you climb in some of the conversations that I was involved with. And it's something that's very noble and admirable. And I think all of those people out there must have appreciated you so much. And it's great to see all of that work getting recognised with this achievement. So, and it's just phenomenal. And I guess this is not the end either, because learning is at an interesting inflection point. These global events keep happening that we have very little control over, and the profession is going in some interesting directions. What are you seeing? Where are you seeing people need help at the moment?
It's a great point, really is. I think, learning is continually evolving, and it's the pace that different organizations run at. Some organizations are future thinking and really doing incredible things, especially when we look at tech, but also for other organizations and other individuals, we're still at that beginning point. Massive things I see is an influx of teachers, now moved into corporate L&D, but unfortunately having to pay quite a lot of amount, they feel, in order to do academies and courses, in order to try and progress into those careers. And so for me, it's trying to make that difference and actually creating courses that are at a really reasonable price point. So 2 figures instead of 4 figures, because people are remortgaging their houses, they're selling their cars, they're taking out loans. And so it's how can I, as an individual with somehow a voice in this industry, actually try and make that difference. And so it's, once again, it's trying to do the right thing and not being really greedy. But also when we look at the industry, we're not just instructional design, we're so many other things. We are conscious of what we actually do. We've seen such a rise in marketing for learning, content curation, actually being able to utilize our LMSs to their full potential. And so it's how do we make that noise around those roles, because those ultimately will benefit the organizations and make L&D a more valuable item within those.
I mean, that's just a trend that I hadn't picked up on at all. I mean, that's, it's kind of scary to hear that. And also not only that people are sort of feeling like they have to pay all this money, but also potentially being led up the wrong path, or not the only path. Instructional design isn't the only skill that people need in corporate L&D, and especially if they're coming from, we're teaching or a non-corporate background, you've got to be able to navigate, the demands of the business and the needs of the business in order to be able to make a difference there. So, I mean, that's mind-blowing. I'd be very interested to hear from anybody that is making that transition at the moment. So if you're watching, drop us a line. But every conversation I have, doesn't matter which part of HR I'm talking to at the moment, comes back to this skills question. But what do you see as being, the next frontier for L&D, or maybe a big priority to tackle, for the rest of 2023?
It is such an interesting thing about skills, and it is that thing, like I was saying, some organizations so far ahead and, really delving into skills, what does it mean? But also we really have to bring everything back to how do we provide value to an organization, because there is always that continual fear of, if something happens in the economy, is L&D the first to be chopped? And it's how do we show value? So how are we optimizing our platforms? Not just doing the usual merry-go-round of we buy a platform, we don't fully utilize it. 2 years later, we go to LearnTech and buy a new platform. And then 2 years later, we do the same. It's how do we really make the most of that? Also, content libraries. There's so much amazing content out there at the moment. How do we curate it so it's a great learning experience? So how are we providing value, but also how are we communicating? And also, how are we taking legacy content and making that into new products really rapidly, cost effectively? So taking our PowerPoints, our face-to-faces, utilizing a rapid authoring tool, but also making sure that it's a right learning experience, because it's just how do we provide those pieces of value along the way and really make ourselves the area that we want it to be.
Mm. And just finally, before we wrap up, I'm sure we can share the details of your global community as well. So get involved. It sounds like you'd be in great company if you want to get involved in the global learning and development community. But kind of what is your hope? The big, stepping back, big picture. Kind of what's your hope for learning as a profession, and maybe people who are going to come after you and get the Colin Corder Award in the future?
I would say, do as much as possible, be the hardest working person that you can do, but also have zero expectation. Just try and do as much good as possible, because it's amazing how doing good ends with good things. So I think that's for me. I'm unique in this, in that, there is so much focus on what I've done for others, but it's really, how can you really make a difference? And I think that's kind of a legacy that I always wanted.
And I think that legacy speaks volumes for itself. So, John, thank you very, very much for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure to speak to you as always. And as I say, kind of join that illustrious Hall of Fame now as well. So congratulations again from all of us at LNTV, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thanks a bunch.
Well, that's the end of a really packed show, and I thought it was really good, really high quality interviews. But the highlight for me, I think, was Gary Cookson, Kate. He did a really good job bringing out a lot of the key issues which he's talked about in his book. Did you feel that too?
Yes, been long overdue to get him on Learning Now television. So the book, HR for Hybrid Working, is just very much of the moment. And as I think I said during the interview, it feels like a challenge that organisations haven't got cracked yet. So, I work in a fully remote organisation. We come together in the office, we collaborate in person, super valuable. We don't have kind of dedicated office days or anything like that. It's very flexible. But some of the bigger organisations that kind of Gary's working with as clients, having these set days, changing how the dynamic of the office works, there's just so much to that. And I think also, you've got compliance issues, you've got all of these things. Deloitte in their 2023 Human Capital Trends research used the phrase boundaryless working, which I quite like. So this concept of work anywhere, just plug your laptop in, log in for some training. Also, we all know the drill. It all sounds so easy, but the reality is far from that. And we're over the hump now. It's 3 years since lockdown started. We're over the hump of that crisis and getting into this new era of business as usual. And ultimately, I do think that organisations have given lip service to some of the changes that have happened over the last few years. And really, most of them don't want to change that much. And it's hard. It's hard to change to be properly hybrid. So yeah, really enjoyed that, and I think there's so much more to come there. I think that story will play out for a long time to come yet.
It also underplays everything. It just underpins everything, doesn't it? So that if you don't get hybrid right, then you don't get anything right. You don't get the culture right, you don't get the performance right, you don't get the learning and development and the career progression and the onboarding and the offboard. Everything falls apart when you don't get hybrid right. So I think, that one of my small obsessions at the moment is that L&D doesn't take a broad enough view. And that's one thing that I think L&D could really help with, is informing organizations and working with organizations to get it right in context. Because what works for one organization is not a blueprint for every other. Everyone has to deal with their own circumstances and to do it individually.
I agree, and I think that the concept for us in L&D of synchronous and asynchronous feels like old hat. We've been talking about that for more years than I care to count. But I think that notion hasn't applied to everybody's day-to-day work, because this need to be on calls, this need to be on Teams, this need to be online between 9 and 5. We're still working like we're in the Industrial Revolution in terms of those hours, when it's crazy. There's so many roles that could adapt to suit people's schedules. and periods of productivity in a much better way. So I think we've got more to do than has been done, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think you're right. Lots to do, but some real insights there from Gary. So, well, thanks very much, everyone, for staying with us all the way through the show. And remember, our next program is on the 27th of April. But before then, there are a number of events. Kate, what do you want to highlight this time?
Well, I've got a small thing in my diary called Unleash America, which is happening on the 26th and 27th, with some pre-events on the 25th of April. So just a month away from that now, very exciting. 3rd and 4th of May, Learning Technologies is happening in Excel in London. 7th to the 9th of June, the CIPD Festival of Work at London Olympia. And then 15th of July, your very good friend and somebody who's appearing at Unleash America as well. We're so excited to have him. Elliot Macy is running his Learning Festival in New York, which looks amazing.
It does look amazing. And different. And different. Yeah. It's not a conference.
No,
it's a festival.
He's got great form. He's as much a live wire as he ever was. So that's really exciting to see something new and different coming from Elliot.
Okay, thank you. Well, see you on the 27th of April, and I'll see you on the 27th of April, Kate, as well.
You will indeed.